This is Star Wars Republic Commando True Colors by Karen Travis. Copyrighted in 2007 by Lucasfilm Limited. Prologue. Magito, Outer Rim, the vault of the Jersian Kielsch Merchant Bank, 470 days after the Battle of Geonosis. We're running out of time. We're running out of time. All of us. Sarge. Scorch looks at the security locks on the strong room hatch with the appraising eye of an expert at breaking the unbreakable. That's how I trained him. He's the best. Sarge. We got what we came for. Why are we robbing a bank? You're not robbing it. I'm robbing it. You're just opening a door. This is about justice and relieving separatists of their wealth. Stops them from spending it on armaments. After all, and I'm a civilian now. It doesn't feel like it. Delta are still my squad. I won't go as far as Kalskrata and call them my boys. But boys they are. Scorch is about 12 years old. He's also 24 measured in how far along that path to death he actually is. Which is the only definition I care about. He's running out of time faster than me. The Kaminoans designed the Republic's clone commandos to age fast. And when I think of them as the tiny kids I first knew, it's heartbreaking, yes, even for me. My father didn't quite kill the last bit of feeling in me. Scorch places circuit disruptors against the locks, spaced around the doorframe, one by one, to fry the systems and create a bogus signal that convinces the alarm there's nothing out of order. He freezes for a moment, head cocked, reading the display on his helmet's heads-up display. What's in there, Sarge? I'm not robbing for gain. I'm not a greedy man. I just want justice, see? My Mandalorian armor's black. Black, the traditional color of justice. Beskar colors almost always have meaning. Every Mando who sees me understands my mission in life right away. Part of my inheritance, I say. Father and I didn't agree on my career plans. Justice for me, justice for the clone troops. Used up and thrown away like flimsy napkins. The drinks are on you then, says boss. Delta Sergeant, if we'd known you were loaded, we'd have hit you up earlier. Was loaded. Cut off without a 10 cred. I've never told them about my family, or my title. I think the only person I told was Cal. And then I got the full blast of his class war rhetoric. Sev, Delta Sniper, silent. Which might mean disapproval, or it might not. Trains his DC-17 rifle on the deserted corridors, leading from the labyrinth of vaults and storerooms that hold the wealth and secrets of the galaxy's richest and most powerful, including my family. Fairfax is quite down here. The corridors aren't made of ice, but they're smooth and right, and I can't shake the impression that they're carved straight out of this frozen planet itself. It makes the place feel 10 degrees colder. In 3, says Scorch. But I still prefer a nice big bang. 3, 2, 1. I know he's grinning, helmet or not. Boom, clatter, tinkle. The locks yield silently and open in a sequence. Clack, clack, clack. No alarms, no theft countermeasures to take our heads off. No guards rushing in with blasters. The vault doors roll back to reveal row upon row of polished durasteel deposit boxes lit by a sickly green light. Inside, 2 security droids stand immobile, circuits disrupted along with every lock in here, weapon arms slack at their sides. Well, Fixer asks on the comlink. He is up on the surface a kilometer away, minding the snowspeeder we'll use to exfiltrate from Magneto. He'll get the icon views from all our helmet systems, but he's impatient. What's in there? The future, I tell him. His future, too, I hope. When I touch the deposit box doors, they swing open and their contents glitter or rustle, or smell odd. It's quite a collection. Boss wanders in and fishes out a small, gilt-framed portrait that hasn't seen the light of day for, well, who knows. The 3 commandos stare at it for a moment. What a race of creds. Scorch, who's never expressed a desire for anything beyond a decent meal and more sleep, checks the droids, prodding them with a probe anchored to his belt. You've got until the next patrol to clear out what you need, Sarge. Better hurry. As I said, we're all running out of time. Some of us faster than others. Time's the one thing you can't buy, bribe or steal when you need more. Go on, get out of here. I walk down the corridor lined with unimaginably excessive wealth. Rare precious metals, untraceable credit chips, priceless jewels, antiques, industrial secrets, blackmail material. Ordinary credits aren't the only things that make the galaxy rotate. The Vow family box is in here. I said dismiss, Delta. Boss stands his ground. You can't carry it all on your own. I can carry enough. I can haul a 50-kilo pack all right. Maybe not as easily as young men like him. But I'm motivated, and that shaves years off my age. Dismissed. Thin out. Now. This is my problem, not yours. There's a lot of stuff in here. It's going to take longer than I thought. Time. You just can't buy it. So you have to grab it any way you can. I'll start by grabbing this. 1. Look, all I know is this. The Seps can't have as many droids as Intel says. We've seen that when we've sabotaged their factories. And if they have gazillions of them, somewhere. Why not overrun the whole Republic now and get it over with? Come to that, why won't the Chancellor listen to the generals and just smash the key SEP targets instead of dragging this war out, spreading us thin from core to rim? Add that garbage to the message Lamassu sent him gripping about the clone contract expiring in a couple of years. It all stinks. And when it stinks that bad, we get ready to run. Because it's our sheeps on the line here, understand? Sergeant Calscarata to the Null Ox, discussing the future in light of new intelligence gathered during their unauthorized infiltration of Tipoca City 462 days after Geonosis. Republic Fleet Auxiliary Corps Conveyor en route for Muriel 2nd Airborne 212th Battalion and Omega Squad embarked 470 days after Geonosis. Nice of you to join us, Omega, said Sergeant Bollocks, one hand wrapped around the grab rail in the ship's hangar. And may I be the first to say that you look like a bunch of complete prats. Darman waited for Nina to tell Bollocks we are to shove his opinion, but he didn't take the bait and carried on adjusting the unfamiliar winged jetpack. It was just the usual bravado that went with being scared and hyped up for a mission. Okay, so the Sky Troopers standard pack didn't fit comfortably on Republic Commando Catan armor, but for accuracy of insertion it still beat paragliding. Darman had vivid and painful memories of a low-opening emergency jump on Quilora that hadn't been on target, unless you counted trees. So he was fine with a pair of right wings, even if they were the worst bolt-on goody in the history of procurement in the Grand Army of the Republic. Phi activated his wing mechanisms, and the two blades swung into horizontal position with a hiss of hydraulics, nearly smacking Bollocks in the face. Phi smiled and flapped his arms. Want to see my impression of a Geonosian? What? Plummeting to the ground in a spray of bug splatter after I put a round through you, said Bollocks. You're so masterful. I'm so a sergeant private. Couldn't you at least get us matte black ones? Phi asked. I don't want to plunge to my doom with uncoordinated accessories. People will talk. You'll have right and like it. Bollocks was the senior NCO of Pajai Squad, airborne troops, with a reputation for high-risk missions that Captain Ordo called assertive outreach. The novelty of supporting special forces had clearly worn off. Bollocks pushed Phi's flight blades back into the closed position and maintained a scowl. Anyway, I thought you bunch were born-again Mandalorians. Jetpacks should make you feel right at home. Off for calf and cakes afterwards? Bollocks was still unsmiling granite. Orders are to drop extra materiel and others useless ballast, meaning you. and then shorten our survival odds again by popping in for a chat with a steps on Muriel. Vi did his wounded concern act, hands clasped under his chin. Is it the Mando thing that's coming between us, dear? Just my appreciation of the irony that we're fighting Mando mercenaries in some places. I'd better keep you away from Sergeant Cal then. Yeah, you do that, said Barlax. I lost 10 brothers thanks to them. Clone troopers might have been able to sing Vode Anne, but it was clear that the proud Mandalorian heritage hadn't quite percolated through all the ranks. Darman decided not to tell Scarata. He'd be mortified. He wanted all Jango Fett's clones to have their souls saved for the Manda by some awareness of the only fragile roots they had. Barlax's hostility would break his heart. The compartment went quiet. Darman flexed his shoulders, wondering how Geonosians coped with rings. Did they sleep on their backs, or hang like hawkbats, or what? He'd only ever seen the bugs moving or dead. So to remind another unanswered question. He had a lot of those. Nina, ever alert to the mood of his squad, walked around each of them and checked the makeshift securing straps, yanking hard on the harness that looped between Fi's legs. Fi yelped. Nina gave Fi that 3-beat silent stare, just like Scarata. Don't want anything falling off, do we, son? No, Sarge. Not before I've had a chance to try it out anyway. Nina continued the steer for a little longer. Sitrep briefing in 10 then. He indicated the hatch and inspected the interior of his helmet. Let's not keep General Zay waiting. Barlax stood silent, as if he was working up to telling them something, then shrugged and took Nina's indication that what was to follow wasn't for his ears. Darman did what he always did before an insertion. He settled in a corner to recheck his suit calibration. Aten inspected Fi's jetpack clips with a critical frown. I could knit better attachments than these, he muttered. Do you think you could try cheery and upbeat sometime, Attica? Fi asked. Nina joined in the inspection ritual. It was all displacement activity, but nobody could ever accuse Omega Squad of leaving things to chance. All it has to do is stay attached to Fi until he lands, he said. Fi nodded. That would be nice. Aten set the encrypted holo receiver he had been holding on a bulkhead ledge and locked the compartment hatches. Darman couldn't imagine any clone trooper being a security risk, and wondered if they were offended by being shut out of Spec Ops briefings as if they were civilians. But they seemed to take it as routine, apparently uncurious and uncomplaining, because that was the way they'd been trained since birth. They had their role, and the Republic Commandos had theirs. That was what the Kaminoans had told them anyway. But it wasn't entirely true. Trooper Core, last surviving man of his whole company, was now on SO Brigade strength and seemed to be enjoying himself, charging around the galaxy with the Null Arcs. He was becoming quite a double act with Lieutenant Morel. They shared a taste for the finer points of booby traps. They also enjoyed exploring the social scene, as Karata put it, of every city they happened to pass through. Core fits in just fine. I bet they all can, given the chance and the training. Darman slipped on his helmet and retreated into his own world. Comlinks closed except for the priority override that would let the squad break into the circuit and alert him. If he let his mind drift, the scrolling light display of his HUD blurred and became the nightscape of Coruscant, and he could immerse himself in the precious memory of those brief and illicit days in the city with Etain. Sometimes he felt as if she was standing behind him, a feeling so powerful that he'd look over his shoulder to check. Now he recognized the sensation for what it was, not his imagination or longing, but a Jedi, his Jedi, reaching out in the Force to him. She's General Termukan. You're well out of line, soldier. He felt her touch now, just the fleeting awareness of someone right next to him. He couldn't reach back. He just hoped that, however the Force worked, it let her know that he knew she was thinking of him. But why did the Force speak to so few beings, if it was universal? Darman felt a pang of mild resentment. The Force was another aspect of life that was close to him. But at least that was true for pretty well everyone. It didn't bother him anywhere near as much as the dawning realization that he didn't have what most others did: a little choice. He'd once asked Etain what would happen to the clone troops when the war was over, when they won. He couldn't think about losing. Where would they go? How would they be rewarded? She didn't know. The fact that he didn't know either fed a growing uneasiness. Maybe the Senate hasn't thought that far ahead. Fai turned to pick up his helmet and started calibrating the display. The expression on his face distracted and not at all happy. This was Fai unguarded, not funny, not wisecracking, and alone with his thoughts. Darman's helmet let him observe his brother without provoking a response. Fai had changed, and it had happened during the operations on Coruscant. Darman felt Fai was preoccupied by something the rest of them couldn't see, like a hallucination you'd never tell anyone about because you thought you were going crazy, Or maybe you were afraid nobody else would admit to it. Tommen had a feeling he knew what it was, so he never talked about Etain, and Etain never went on about Lysima. It wasn't fair to Phi. The core conveyor's drives had a very soothing frequency. Tommen settled into that light doze where he was still conscious, but his thoughts rambled free of his control. Yes, Crossart was the problem. It had given them all a glimpse into a parallel universe where people lived normal lives. Tommen was smart enough to realize that his own life wasn't normal, that he'd been bred to fight, nothing else. But his gut said something else entirely, that it wasn't right or fair. He'd have volunteered. He was sure of that. They wouldn't have had to force him. All he wanted at the end of it was some time with Etain. He didn't know what else life had to offer, but he knew there was a lot of it he would never live to see. He'd been alive for 11 standard years, coming up on 12. He was 23 or 24, the mineral said. It wasn't time enough to live. Sergeant Cal said we'd been robbed. Fearfic. I hope Etain can't feel me getting angry. I wish I could sit there and just relax like you, Da, Etain said. How do you get to be so calm? You didn't learn it from Cal, that's for sure. There's just Sergeant Cal and Etain, and my brothers. Oh, and Jusek. General Jusek's one of us. Nobody else really cares. I've got a clean conscience, Tommen said. It had come as a surprise to him after years of cloistered training on Commando to discover that many cultures in the galaxy regarded him as a killer, something immoral. Either that, or I'm too tired to worry. Now he was going to Geftikar to do some more killing. The Alpha Ox might have been sent in to train the local rebels, but Omega was being inserted to topple a government. It wasn't the first, and it probably wouldn't be the last. Heads up, people. Here we go. Nina activated the receiver. The blue holoimage leapt from the projector, and burly bearded Jedi General Arlington Zay, Director of Special Forces, was suddenly sitting in the compartment with them. Good afternoon, Omega, he said. It was the middle of the night as far as they were concerned. I've got a little good news for you. Phi was back on the secure helmet comlink now. Tommen's red HUD audio icon indicated that only he could hear him, which means the rest of it is bad. That's good, sir, said Nina, deadpan. Have you located Arc Alpha 30? They seemed to ignore the question. Null Sergeant Adins sent secure drop zone coordinates, and you're clear to go in. Phi's comlink popped in Domin's ear again. Here comes the but. But, Zay went on, Arc Trooper Alpha 30 now has to be treated as MIA. He hasn't reported in for 2 months. and that isn't unusual. But the local resistance told Sergeant Adin that they lost contact about the same time. Adin was one of Skarata's null arcs. He'd been sent in a few standard days ago to assess the situation, and if he couldn't find the missing ARC trooper, then the man was definitely lost, as in dead lost. Daman wondered what could possibly have happened to an ARC. They weren't exactly easy kills. The Gnolls treated their Alpha brothers as knuckle draggers, but they were pure Jango Fett, genetically unaltered, except for their rapid aging. And they'd been trained by him personally. Hard, resourceful, dangerous men. Still, even the best could have bad luck. It meant that training and motivating the Gafkari resistance was down to Adin now. Daman hoped it didn't end up being his job. All he could think about was how long he'd be stuck there, and when he might see Etain again. Smuggled letters and comlinks signals weren't enough. So what can they do to us? So what if anyone finds out? Daman didn't really know how hard the Grand Army or the Jedi Council could make life for him or Etain. There was always the chance that he'd never see her again. He wasn't sure he could handle that. He knew she was his only taste he knew she was his only taste of a real life. So, are we starting over, General? Nina asked. Zay's desk wasn't visible in the hollow image, but he was sitting down, and he glanced over his shoulder as if someone had come into the room. Not entirely. The rebel militias are competent, but they still need some help in destabilizing the Gafkari government. And they need equipment like the Dees we are dropping. Zay paused. Not full spec, of course. I see we trust them implicitly, sir. We've had one or two aid operations backfire, Sergeant. I admit that. No point over-arming them so they can turn around and use the kit on us. This does the job. Any general intel updates on Gatika? No, sorry. You'll have to fill in the gaps yourself. Numbers. Aiden says around 100,000 trained rebel troops. Daman blinked to activate his HUD database and checked the estimated populations of Gatika. 500 million. Capital city, Ayat. Populations, 500,000. He was used to odds like that now. Well, at least Alpha 30 was busy while he was there, sir, said Nina. The rebels are very good at cascading training. Trained 10. They trained 10 each, and so on. Given our limited numbers, sir, have you ever thought about deploying the whole guard that way? The war would be over a lot faster. It's a strategy, I know. Zay always has that note in his voice lately that made him sound ashamed and embarrassed. Nobody had to ask if this was how he wanted to play things. It was another objective from the Chancellor on the list of take this planet and don't give me excuses orders. But all you need to do is remove the leadership of the Iyet administration, and the rest follows. So, you prepare the battleground for the infantry, enable the rebels. Do what you can, lads, because I can't spare any more men to help you. Great. Understood, said Nina. Sometimes Dahlman wanted to ram his sergeant's patient acceptance down his throat. Omega out. Nobody needed to remind Zay how thinly spread all the guard forces were, especially special operations. They were cross-training regular troopers for Commando roles now. The Guard had fewer than 5,000 Republic Commandos. Inadequate. Didn't even come close. It was a joke. Dahlman waited for Nina to sign off with a surprisingly perfunctory salute, and closed the link. And that wasn't good old gung-ho Nina at all. It was the closest he'd ever come to showing his frustration to the squad. Maybe the Republic would have been better off with droids after all. They don't get hacked off about what's happening to them. And they don't fall in love. I'll try to look on the bright side, seeing as that's my job, said Phi. Last time we inserted into enemy territory without any decent intel, and with totally inadequate numbers. We made lots of interesting new friends. Maybe I'll be the one to get lucky this time. Dahlman ignored the gibe about Etain. The Gafti carry rebels aren't your type, Phi. They're lizards. So are Falleen. I mean lizards. Luggage on legs. They've got a human population too, optimist. Nina changed the subject with uncharacteristic gentleness. Come on. We always insert without enough intel. He hadn't told Phi to shut up in ages. As if he felt sorry for him now. It's the way the world works. Okay? Buckets on. We'll be over Iyet in 20 minutes. The core conveyor's cargo hangar was a stock void with a ramped airlock at one end. It was an armed freighter, one of many commandeered from the merchant fleet, taken up from trade, and so nicknamed Tufties. And it was built simply to move vehicles and supplies, and sometimes men, and unload them discreetly where required. Dahlman wondered what its cargo had been in peacetime. Like the small traffic interdiction vessels. It masqueraded as a neutral civilian craft for covert operations. Tufties could be deployed on planets where the arrival of an acclimator would get the wrong sort of attention. The hangar was packed with speeder bikes and crates. Dahlman picked his way through them, following Atin to the hangar doors, where a loadmaster in yellow-trimmed pilot armor, minus helmet, steered crates on repulsors, towards the ramp and lined them up. "Geese," said the loadmaster, not looking up from his datapad, "and a few E-rebs, and one large arty piece." "How many rebs?" Aten asked. 50. "Is that the best we can do?" "We've been arming them for a year, just a top-up." The loadmaster seemed satisfied that he had the correct consignments, and stared at the commandos with a wary eye. He reached for the rail that ran along the bulkhead and hooked his safety line to it. "If it's any comfort, you look pretty sinister in that black rig. Even the white rings, I don't think you're a bunch of overrated Mando-loving weirdos at all." Fi gave him a bow. "May all your future deployments be with the Galactic Marines on Fresher Detail, Nevad." But Aten could never pass things off with a joke. "What's your problem, pal?" "Just wondering," said the loadmaster. "Wondering what?" "Mandos. You ever fought those guys?" "I have. They keep popping up in SIP forces. They kill us, and you are raised as good little Mando boys." "Is that who you feel you are?" "Let's put it this way," said Fi. "I don't feel like a Republic citizen because none of us are. In case you hadn't noticed, we don't exist. No vote, no identification docs, no rights." Niner shoved Fi in the back. 1-5, shut it. "Loadmaster, wind your neck in and don't question our loyalty, or I'll have to smack you. Now, let's get to work." It was the first time that Daman could recall the sense of brotherhood among clones. All clones, regardless of unit, faltering. The 2nd Airborne obviously had an issue with Mandalorians. And maybe the nearest they could kick were the Republic commandos raised, trained, and educated, mostly by Mandalorian sergeants like Scarata, Vow, and Bralor. He thought it was a bad omen for the mission. Yes, Sergeant Cal would be very upset to see this. Core conveyor was low enough now for them to see the landscape beneath from one of the viewports. Daman could see from his HUD icon of Niner's field of view that he wasn't looking at the drop zone, but was engrossed in his datapad. It was just a mass of numbers. Aten, though, was reading a message, and although Daman tried not to be nosy, he couldn't help but notice that it was from Lasima, his Trilek girlfriend, and it was educational. They do say it's the quiet ones that want watching. Daman tried to concentrate on Gaftika. It looked like a nice place even at night. It wasn't a red, dusty wasteland like Geonosis, or a freezing wilderness like Fest. From this height, the city of Iat was a mosaic of illuminated parkland and busy, straight roads fringed by regularly spaced houses, speckled with gold light. A river wandered through the landscape, visible as a black glittering ribbon. It looked like the kind of place where people had normal lives and enjoyed themselves. It didn't look like enemy territory at all. Darman cut into Fi's personal circuit to speak, but was instantly deafened by the volume of the glimmick music. That was how Fi dealt with things. A thick wall of noise and chatter to shut out the next moment. Darman cut out of the circuit again. The Loadmaster lowered his visor and placed his hand over the control panel. Okay, remember, just let yourselves drop like a normal parasail jump for a few seconds. Then activate the jets. Don't power out. Opening in 5, 4. I'd rather know if the jetpacks didn't work when I still had my boots on the deck, Fi said. 2 and go. The cargo doors slid back and a fierce blast of air peppered dust against Darman's visor. The charts were all over thick forest now. The Loadmaster had one hand on the cargo release, and his head turned toward the holochart projected on the control panel. It showed open land a few kilometers ahead. When conveyor overflew it, the open space turned out to be short, dry grass. It showed up clearly in Darman's night vision filter. Get away, said the Loadmaster. Releasing the static lines, the crates slipped off the ramp, one by one, and glided toward the land on extraction parasails that looked like exotic white blooms opening in the night. The last container dwindled to a speck beneath them, hitting the grass in a plume of dust. The ship climbed a little, and the ramp raised to a flat platform. This is your stop, Omega. Stay safe, okay? Darman, like all the commandos, had done plenty of free-fall jumps. He couldn't even recall how many, but he still felt a brief burst of adrenaline as he watched Aten walk calmly off the end of the ramp and vanish. Darman followed him, gripping his DC-17 flat against his chest on its sling. 1, 2, 3, 4 paces, and then 5. On 5, there was nothing beneath the soles of his boots. He fell and his stomach seemed to collide with his lungs, forcing the breath out of them for a heartbeat. He hit the jetpack-powered button on his harness. On the count of 3, the wings ejected from their housing. The motor kicked in. He wasn't falling any longer. He was flying, with the faint vibration of the jets, making his sinuses itch. The green-lit image of Gefgika's heathland spread beneath him, and when he turned his head, he could see the faint heat profile from Aten's jets. Conveyor was gone. The crate had a lot more acceleration than he'd thought. Look, Ma, said Fi, disembodied voice on the secure channel. No hands. You haven't got a Ma, said Darman. Maybe a nice old lady will adopt me. I'm very lovable. Darman couldn't see the others now, only their viewpoint icons on his helmet's HUD. The squad split up, each man following a different flight path to the RV point, dropping as low as they could and hugging the contours of the land. The plan was to hit the ground running, literally. As soon as the terrain changed to woods, they could use for cover. Dahmer didn't make quite the clean landing he'd expected. He somersaulted on the tip of one wing, coming to rest in low, scrubby bushes. Nina must have seen his HUD icon. Can't you ever land on your feet, Daw? Oh, sick. Dahmer was more embarrassed than hurt. At least he hadn't set fire to the vegetation. The jets shut off on impact. He scrambled to his feet and reoriented himself. I'm okay. He couldn't tell where Phi and Atin were from the view in their HUD icons, but he could see they were moving fast, and their transponders were converging on the RV coordinates. Blue squares edging towards a yellow cross superimposed on a chart of the drop zone. He realized he still had 50 meters to run with the jetpack. Rings spread like an insect. All clear, Nina grunted, as if he was struggling out of his harness. Short-range comms only from now on, Omega. Now where? You know, on Urn 5, the locals would stick you on top of a festival tree as a decoration. An unfamiliar voice cut into Dahmer's comm circuit. Now he could see a shape in his night vision, a faint outline that didn't resolve into a man until he was right on top of it. He could see who it was now, a man who looked pretty much like himself, except that, like all the gnolls, he was broader and heavier. The Kaminoans had played around with the fit genome a little too much at first. Dahmer wondered how many other experiments they tried before they got the mix right. Adin Null Arc, N12, grabbed him by the arm and beckoned him to follow. He was wearing rough-looking clothes, no helmet, no plates, and no distinctive kilt like Kama. Dahmer hadn't been expecting to find him in civvies. And as he picked his way through the undergrowth, cursing that stupid ring that now wouldn't retract because he'd bent the mechanisms in the fall. He also didn't expect to see small, fast-moving figures with bright, reflective eyes emerging with DC-15 rifles. They were lizards, all right. Garbase, Teklet, Quilora, 470 days after Geonosis, deadline for the withdrawal of human colonists. General Etain McCann had never felt less like doing a day's duty in her life. But she would do it. She had to. Outside the Army headquarters building, a modest house that had once belonged to a Trandoshan slaver, now long gone with the rest of the occupying separatist forces. A crowd of farmers stood in grim silence. She paused in front of the doors and prepared to step outside to reason with them. You have to leave. It's the deal we did, remember. I don't think you should handle this, ma'am, said the garrison's commander, Levitt. His yellow-trimmed helmet was tucked under one arm. A fit, clean-shaven, black-haired man in his 20s. So much like Dahmer that it hurt. Let me talk to them. He was a clone, like Daw. Exactly like Daw. Exactly like every other clone in the Grand Army of the Republic. Although without Daw's permanent expression of patient good humor. He had those same dark eyes that gave Etain a pang of loneliness and yearning at the constant reminder that Daw was where. At that moment, she had no idea. She could feel him in the Force, as she always could, and he was unharmed. That was all she knew. She made a mental note to contact Odo later to check his location. "Ma'am," said Levitt, a little more loudly, "are you all right? I said I'll do this." Etain made a conscious effort to stop seeing Dawman in Levitt's face. "Responsibility of rank, Commander." Behind her, she heard a faint silken rustle like an animal moving. "But thank you." "You'll need to be careful," said a low, liquid voice, "or we'll have your nasty little sergeant to answer to." Jeanette brushed past Etain's legs. The Galanan shapeshifter was in her true form of a sleek black carnivore. But she could just as easily have transformed herself into the exact replica of Levitt or Etain. Nasty little Sergeant Cal Scarata, short, ferocious, angry, had exiled her here for a few months. She'd fallen from grace with him. Now that she was several months pregnant, she'd started to understand why. "I'm being careful," Etain said. "He holds me responsible for your safety." "You're scared of him, aren't you?" "And so are you, girl." Etain draped her brown robes carefully to disguise the growing bulge of pregnancy, and pulled another loose coat on top. Teklet was in the grip of winter, which was just as well. The excuse for voluminous clothes was welcome. But even without the top layer, she didn't look conspicuously pregnant. She just felt it, tired and lonely. Nobody here would know or care who the father was anyway. "There's no need for you to supervise the evacuation personally," said Jeanette. "The fewer who see you, the better. Don't tempt fate." Etain ignored her, and the doors parted, letting a snow-speckled gust of cold air into the lobby. Jeanette shot out in front of her like a sand panther, and bounded through the drifts. "Insanity," the Garanan hissed. She progressed in flowing leaps. "You have a child to worry about." "My son," Etain said, "is fine. And I'm not ill. I'm pregnant." And she owed her troops. She owed them like she owed Dawman, RC 1136, whose last letter, a real letter, written on flimsy in a precise, disciplined hand, a mix of gossip about his squad, and little longings for a time with her, was soothed with constant reading and refolding, and kept safe inside her tunic, not in her belt. The snow crunched under her boots as she waded to the road, cut cut through the drifts by constant traffic. It was a brilliantly sunny day, blindingly bright, a lovely day for a walk. If this had been a normal life, and she had been an ordinary woman, it's hard not to tell him. It's hard not to mention the baby when he asks how I am, his baby. But Scarata forbade her to tell him. She almost understood why. Jeanette continued her progression of controlled leaps. She probably hunted that way, Etienne thought, pouncing on small animals buried deep in the snow. Scarata will be furious if you miscarry. Maybe not. He was angry enough when he found out I was pregnant. I'm not going to risk upsetting Cal. You know the politics of this. I know he means what he says. He'll have a warship reduce Kilora to molten slag if I cross him. Yes, he would. Etienne believed him, too. Scarata would rip a hole in the galaxy if it improved the lot of the clone troops in his care. Just under 3 months, and then I won't be your problem any longer. Local months or galactic standard months. Etienne still felt crazy each morning. Who cares? Does it matter? What would your Jedi masters do to you for consorting with a soldier? Kick me out of the order, probably. You fear such trivia things. Let them. If they kick me out, Etienne whispered, I have to surrender my command. But I have to stay with my troops. I can't sit out of this war while they fight Jeanette. Don't you understand that? The Grenadian snorted, leaving little clouds of breath on the icy air. To deliberately bring a child into this galaxy during a war, to have to keep it hidden and then hand it over to that? Etienne held up her hand for silence. Oh, so you and Cal have been talking, have you? I know I was mad and selfish and irresponsible. I shouldn't have taken advantage of Dawes' naivete. Go ahead. You won't be saying anything that Cal didn't. Just minus the Mandora abuse. How can he possibly raise the child for you? That mercenary, that killer. He raised his own and he raised the Knowles. I don't want that, believe me. He's a good father, an experienced father. Etienne was too far ahead of Levitt for him to overhear, but she had the feeling that he would be conveniently deaf to gossip anyway. Now she could see the crowd of farmers massed at the gates, in the perimeter fence, silent and grim, hands thrust into pockets. As soon as they spotted her, the rumbling chorus of complaint began. She knew why. We armed them. Me and General Zay. We turned them into a resistance army, trained them to fight Seps, made them guerrillas when it suited us, and now it doesn't suit us anymore. Throw them away. That was why she had to face them. She'd use them, maybe not knowingly, but they wouldn't care about the academic point. "Commander Levitt," she said, "only open fire if you feel that your men are in danger." "Hoping to avoid that, ma'am." "They've got DC-15s, remember. We armed them. Not full spec, though." A cordon of clone troopers stood between Etain and the crowd, as white and glossy as the snow around them. In the distance, she could hear the grindings of gears as an ATTE armored vehicle thudded around the perimeter of the temporary camp set up to oversee the human evacuation. The clone troopers, each man with Domin's sweetly familiar face, had their orders. The farmers had to leave. They handled humanitarian missions surprisingly well for men who'd been bred solely to fight and had no idea of what normal family life was like. Well, not much different from me then. As she came up behind them, they parted without even turning their heads. It was one of those things you could do with 360-degree helmet sensors. In the front of the crowd, she recognized a face. She knew nearly all of them, inevitably. But Hefra Burhan's eyes were the most difficult to meet. "You proud of yourself, girl?" Burhan stared at her, hostile and betrayed. He'd given her shelter when she'd been on the run from the local militia. She owed him more than kicking him out by force, tearing him away from the only home he'd ever known. "I'd rather do my own dirty work than get someone else to do it," said Etain. "But you can start over, and the Golanans can't." "Ooh, that's the government line all of a sudden. Since we served our purpose and cleared the planet for you." The farmers had weapons, as farmers always did, most of which were old rifles, for dealing with the Godans that attacked grazing Merlee herds. But some also had the Republic issue Ds. They held them casually, some just gripped in their hands, others resting in the crooks of their arms or slung across their backs. But Etain could feel the tension rising among both them and the line of troopers. She wondered if her unborn child could sense these things in the Force yet. She hoped not. He had enough of a war waiting for him. "I preferred you to hear it from me than from a stranger." Not true. She was here to hide her pregnancy. She couldn't help thinking that the awful duty served her right for deceiving Daman. "You have to leave, you know that. You're being given financial aid to start over. There are established farms waiting for you on Kibola. It's a better prospect than Quilora." "It's not home," said a man, standing a little behind Burhan, "and we're not going. Everyone else left weeks ago. Except 2,000 of us that haven't, Gil." Burhan folded his arms. The sound of the ATTE had stopped, and every wild noise carried on the still, cold air. Quilora was so very, very quiet compared with the places she'd been. "And you can't move us if we don't want to be going." It took Etain a moment to realize he meant violence rather than forced persuasion, and she felt a little ripple of anxiety in some of the troops. She and Levitt had been ordered, to use force if necessary. Janot slipped forward between the troops and sat on her haunches, and some of the farmers stared at her as if she was some exotic pet or hunting animal. Of course, they'd probably never seen a Galanan, or at least hadn't realized they had. There were so few of them left, and they could take any form they pleased. The Republic will remove you, farmer, because they fear us, Janot said. In this war, you now count for nothing. We use the power we have, so go while you can. Baran blinked at the Galanan. For a few moments, the only four-legged species the farmers saw were their animals, and none of them talked back. This is a big planet. There's plenty of room for all of us. Not enough for you. You wiped out our prey. We've starved. You're destroying us by wiping out our food chain. And now it's our turn. No more killing, Etain snapped. Levitt eased through the line of troops and stood a little in front of her, to her left. She could sense his readiness to intervene. Galanans didn't have weapons, but nature had made them efficient killers. They'd all seen plenty of evidence. These are difficult times, Burhan, and nobody gets a happy ending. You'll be far safer where you're going. Do you understand me? His gaze fixed on hers. He was frail and worn out, his eyes watery and red-rimmed from age and the biting cold air. He might have been only the same age as Kalskarata, but agriculture here was a brutal existence that took its toll. You'd never shoot us. You're a Jedi. You are all full of peace and pity and stuff. Try thinking of me as an army officer, she said softly, and you might get a different picture. Last chance. There were only so many ultimata she could give them, and that was the last. The compound gates opened with a metallic scrape, and Levitt moved the troops forward to edge the crowd away. It was cold. They'd get fed up and wandered home sooner or later. For a moment, the sense of hatred and resentment in the Force was so strong that Etain had thought the Krillorans might start a riot. But it seemed to be just a staring contest, which was unwinnable against troops whose eyes they couldn't see. There was also the small matter of penetrating a wall of plastoid alloy armor. Levitt's voice boomed from the voice projector in his helmet. Etain could have sworn that nearby branches shivered. Go back to your farms and get ready to leave, all of you. Report to the landing strip in 72 hours. Don't make this any harder than it is. For you or for us, someone yelled from the crowd. Would you abandon everything you had and start again? I'd willingly trade places with you, Levitt said, but I don't have the option. Etain couldn't help but be more interested in the clone commander for a moment. It was an odd comment, but she felt that he meant it, and that unsettled her. She was used to seeing Daman and the other commandos as comrades, with needs and aspirations that nobody else expected them to have. But she'd never heard a regular trooper openly express a wish for something beyond the GAR. It was uniquely poignant. They'd all rather be somewhere else, even if they're not sure what it is. All of them, like Daw, like me, like anyone. She felt Levitt's brief embarrassment at his own frankness, but there was no gesture or head movement to indicate to anyone else that he was being literal. I can't think of the whole galaxy any longer. My thoughts are with these slave soldiers, and that's as much caring as I can manage right now. I want them to live. Sorry, Burhan. I am a bad Jedi, aren't I? Etain had made that mental deal a long while ago. It wasn't the Jedi way. But then no Jedi had ever been faced with leading a conventional army and making brutal, pragmatic combat decisions on a daily basis. No Jedi should have, as far as she was concerned. But she was in it now, and she'd make what difference she could to the men around her. I'll give you 3 more days to report to the landing area with your families, Burhan. Etain wanted to look a little more commanding, but she was small, skinny, and uncomfortably pregnant. The hands-on-hip stance wasn't going to work. She put one hand casually on her lightsaber hilt instead, and summoned up a little force help to press insistently on a few minds around Burhan. I mean this. I won't back down. If you don't comply, I will order my troops to remove you by any means necessary. Etain stood waiting for the crowd to break up. They'd argue, complain, wait until the last moment, and then cave in. 2,000 of them. They knew they couldn't resist several dozen well-trained, well-armed troopers, let alone a whole company of them. That was the remnant of the garrison. They were keen to finish the job and rejoin their battalion, the 35th Infantry. It was one of those things Etain found most touching about these soldiers. They didn't want to be doing what they called a cushy job, while their brothers were fighting on the front line. She knew the feeling all too well. Burhan and the rest of the farmers paused for a few moments, meters from the line of troopers, and then turned and trudged away in the direction of Imbrani, silent and sullen. Jinnat sat watching them like one of those black marble statues on the Shurbank building on Coruscant. Lev cocked his head. I don't think they are going to go quietly, ma'am. It might get unpleasant. It's easier to charge battle droids than civilians. If it does, if it if it does, we disarm them and remove them bodily. Disarming can be the rough bit. Yes, it was quicker and simpler to kill. Etain didn't enjoy the immoral pragmatism that always overtook her lately. As she lost her focus in the unbroken carpet of snow ahead of her, she thought of the black specks that began to appear in her field of vision were her eyes playing the usual tricks, just cells floating in the fluid. Then they grew larger. The white blanket bulged, and suddenly shapes began forming, moving, resolving into a dozen or so glossy black creatures, exactly like Jannat. They were Glanons, proving that they could be anywhere, undetected. Etain shuddered. They trotted after the farmers, who seemed oblivious to them, until someone turned around and let out a shout of surprise. Then the whole crowd turned, panicking as if they were being stalked. The Glanons seemed to melt into the snow again, flattening instantly into gleaming black pools that looked like voids, and then merging perfectly with the white landscape. They'd vanished from sight. Several farmers were clutching their rifles, aiming randomly, but they didn't open fire. They didn't have a target. It was a clear threat. You can't see us, and we'll come for you in the end. Jannat had once shown what that meant when she'd taken revenge on a family of informers. Glanons were predators, intelligent and powerful. You can't feel them in the force, can you, ma'am? Levitt whispered. One of the clone troopers seemed to be checking his rifle optics, clearly annoyed that he hadn't spotted the Glanons with a wide range of senses in both the weapon and his helmet. At least we are working with the same limitations for a change. No, I can't detect them unless they let me. Etain had once mistaken the telepathic creatures for force users, feeling their presence tingling in her veins, but they could vanish completely to every sense when they chose, silent, invisible, without thermal profile, beyond the reach of sonar and the force. It still alarmed her. Perfect spies. Levitt gestured to one of the troopers, and the platoon fanned out beyond the perimeter fence. Perfect saboteurs. General Zay thought so too. So did the Senate Security Council. Glanons were on Coruscant, in the heart of the Republic's intelligence machine. Maybe in 100 or even 1,000 places where they couldn't be seen, and where they could do immense damage. If the Republic didn't honor its deal with them sooner rather than later, they could and would throw a huge hydro spanner in the works, and nobody would see it coming. I'm new to this, Etain said. Why do we seem to create enemies for ourselves? Recruiting spies and then alienating them. Isn't that like handing someone your rifle and turning your back on them? I suppose I'm new to this too, said Levitt. They headed back to the headquarters building. Poor man. He'd only seen a dozen years of life. and all he'd ever known was combat. I stay away from policy. All I can do is handle what comes down the pike at us. Etain had to ask, would you really swap places with a farmer? Levitt shrugged, but his casual gesture didn't fool her Jedi senses. Farming looks quite challenging. I like the open spaces. They often said that these men gestated in glass vats. Daw's brother Phi loved negotiating the dizzying canyons of buildings on Coruscant. The Null Arc troopers like Ordo didn't care for confined spaces. Etain let Levitt go on ahead and slowed down to concentrate on the child within her, wondering if he might turn out a little claustrophobic too. It's not genetic, is it? But will he die before his time? Will he inherit Daw's accelerated aging? She'd been worried first for Dawman, and then for herself, but her anxieties were now largely taken up by the baby, and all the things she didn't know. Cal Scarata was right. She hadn't thought. She'd been so set on giving Dawman a son that, Force-guided or not, there were too many things she hadn't considered carefully enough. Accelerating the pregnancy is convenient for me, but what about him? She no longer had a choice. She'd agreed to hand over the baby to Cal Bier, Papa Cal. He must have been a good father. His clones clearly adored him, and he treated them all as if they were his own flesh and blood. Her son, and it took all her strength not to name him, would be fine with him. He had to be. Her Force awareness told her that her son would touch and shape many lives. Cal won't even let me give him a name. She could make a run for it, but she knew Cal Scarata would find her wherever she hid. I want this baby so badly. It's only temporary. When the war's over, I'll get him back, and... will he even know me? Janet brushed past her legs, reminding her suddenly of Wallen Vow's hunting animal, a half-wild strill called Lord Murdalen. The Glennon glanced back at her with vivid orange eyes. The last of the farmers will leave in a few days, girl, and after that, you'll concentrate on producing a healthy baby. Nothing else. There was plenty more to worry about, but Janot was right. That was enough to be going on with. Etain went back into the house and settled into meditation, and couldn't resist reaching out in the Force to touch Dawman. He'd feel it, she knew he would. Magito, Outer Rim vaults of the Dressing Kilosh Merchant Bank. 470 days after Geonosis. Wallen Vow enjoyed irony, and there was none more profound than seizing as a soldier that inheritance his father had denied him for wanting to join the army. On the metal door of the deposit box, a cupboard with a set of sliding shelves, was an engraved plate that read Vow, Count of Gessel. When the old Shakar dies, that'll be me, Val said. In theory, anyway. It'll pass to my cousin. He looked over his shoulder. Even though the sensors in his Mandalorian helmet gave him wraparound vision. Didn't I say thin out Delta? Move it. That wasn't used to anything other than instant obedience from his squads. He drummed it into them on Commando, the hard way when necessary. Scarata thought you built Special Forces soldiers by treats and pats on the head, but it just produced weaklings. Vao's squads had the lowest casualty rates because he reinforced the animal will to survive in every man. He was proud of it. You did, Boss said. But you look like you need a hand. Anyway, you're not our sergeant any longer, technically speaking. No disrespect, Citizen Vao. It was hard on them because I cared. Because they had to be hard to survive. Cal never understood that. The fool. Val still had trouble breathing some days, thanks to the broken nose Scarata had given him. The crazy little Chakar didn't understand training at all. The next droid patrol wouldn't come this way for a few hours. Security droids trundled constantly through the labyrinth of corridors, deep under the Magitan ice. A banking stronghold the Moons claimed could never be breached. It still made sense to get out sooner rather than later, and Delta should have banged out by now. They call in airstrikes and sabotage ground defenses, and Bakara's Marines were moving in again. They'd achieved their mission, and it was extraction time. I should have thrashed more sense into you then, Vao said. He unfolded a plastoid bivouac sheet and knotted the corners. It was always a bad idea not to plan for the most extreme situations. He'd been certain he would only take what was rightfully his, but this was too good to pass up. Okay, you and Scorch hold this between you while I'll fill it. We can empty the I steal, you don't. It was a fine point, but it mattered to Vao. Scarata might have raised a pack of hooligans, but Vao's squads were disciplined. Even Sev. Sev was psychotic and lacked even the most basic social graces, but he wasn't a criminal. As Vao tipped the first likely-looking box into the makeshift container, cash credits and bonds, which would do very nicely indeed, the whiff of oily musk announced the arrival of the Histril, Lord Murdalan. Fixer stepped back to let the animal pass. Murd, I told you to wait by the exit, said Vao. All Shrills were intelligent, but Murd was especially smart. The animal padded down the narrow passage and velvet silence, and looked up expectantly, somehow managing not to drool on the floor for once. It fixed Vao with an intense, knowing gold stare, making any anger impossible. Who couldn't love a face like that? That Shrill had stood by him since boyhood, and anyone who didn't see its miraculous spirit had no common decency or heart. They said Strills stank, but Val didn't care. A little natural musk never hurt anyone. You want to help Murdica? Here. He slipped his flamethrower off his webbing. Carry this, good Murd. The Strill took the barrel of the weapon in its massive jaws and sat back on its haunches. Drool ran down to the trigger guard and pulled on the floor. Cute, Sev muttered. And clever. Val signaled to Murd to watch the door and slid the drawers of the Val deposit box from their runners. Anyone who doesn't like my friend Murd can slanapi. Sarge, it's the ugliest thing in the galaxy, Scott said. And we've seen plenty of ugly. Yeah, you've got a mirror, said Sev. Ugliness is an illusion, gentlemen. Val began sorting through his disputed inheritance. Like beauty, like color. All depends on the light. The first thing that caught his eye in the family box was his mother's flawless square-cut Chironi sapphire, the size of a human thumbprint, set on a pin, and flanked by two smaller matching stones. In some kinds of light, they were a vibrant cobalt blue, while in others they turned forest green. Beautiful. But real forests had been destroyed to find them, and slaves died mining them. The only reality is action. Sev grunted deep in his throat. He didn't like wasting time, and wasn't good at hiding it. His HUD icon showed he was watching Mud carefully. Whatever you say, Sergeant. The strong room held a treasure trove of portable, easily hidden and untraceable things that could be converted to credits anywhere in the galaxy. Val stumbled on only one deposit box, whose contents were inexplicably worthless. A bundle of love letters tied with green ribbon. He read the opening line of the first three and threw them back. Apart from that one box, the rest were a rich man's emergencies belt, the equivalent of the soldier's survival kit, of a fishing line, blade, and a dozen compact essentials for staying alive behind enemy lines. Val's 100-liter backpack had room enough for a few extras. Everything: gems, wads of flimsy bonds, cash credits, metal coins, small lacquered jewel boxes. He didn't pause to open was tipped and unceremoniously. Delta stood around fidgeting, unused to idleness, while the chrono was counting down. I told you to leave me here, Val could still manage the voice of menace. Don't disobey me. You know what happens. Boss hung manfully to his end of the plastoid sheet, but his voice was shaky. You can't give us an order, Citizen Val. They were the best special forces troops in the galaxy, and here Val was, still unable to manage the thank you or well done that they deserved. But much as he wanted to, the cold black heart of his father, his true legacy, choked off all attempts to express it. Nothing was ever good enough for his father, especially him. Maybe the old man just couldn't bring himself to say it. And he meant to all along. No, he didn't. Don't make excuses for him. But my boys know me. I don't have to spell it out for them. I ought to shoot you, Val said. You're getting sloppy. Val checked the chrono on his forearm plate. Any time now, Bakara's Galactic Marines would start pounding the city of Jagat with glacier busters. He was sure. He'd feel it like a seismic shock. Looking for anything in particular, Sev asked. No. Random opportunism. Val didn't need to cover his tracks. His father didn't know or care if he was alive or dead. Your disappointment of a son came back, Papa. You didn't even know I disappeared to Commando for 10 years, did you? There was nothing the senile Hutton could do about it anyway. Val was the one better able to swing a crippling punch these days. Just a smokescreen, and make it worth the trip. He knew what their next question would have been if they'd asked it. They never asked what they knew they didn't need to be told. What was he going to do with it all? He couldn't tell them. It was too much too soon. He was going to hand it all over to a man who'd kill him for a bet. All except what was rightfully his. I'm not planning to live in luxurious exile, Voss said. Scorch stepped over Murd and stood at the door. Dee's ready. Donating it to the treasury, then. It'll be used responsibly. Val's backpack was now stuffed solid and heavy enough to make him wince when he heaved it up on his shoulders. He tied the plastoid sheet into a bundle worth millions maybe, and slung it across his chest. He hoped he didn't fall or he'd never get up again. Oh yeah, he said, nodding toward the doors. Let's go. Murd braced visibly, and then shot out into the corridor. It always responded to the word Oya with wild, noisy enthusiasm, because that meant they were going hunting. But it was intelligent enough to know when to stay silent. Madala Murd. Clever Murd. It was the right name for the Strill. Delta advanced down the corridor toward the ducts and environmental control rooms that kept the underground bank from freezing solid. Following Murd's wake, which even Val had to admit it, was marked by a trail of saliva. Strills dribbled. It was part of the bizarre charm, like flight, 6 legs, and jaws that could crunch clean through bone. Said skidded on a patch of Strill's spit. Fair feck. Could be worse, Scorch said. Much worse. Val followed up the rear, his helmet's panoramic sensor showing him the view at his back. There was an art to moving forward with that image in front of you on the HUD. An image that sent the unwary stumbling like the men he'd trained. Val could see past the disorienting things the visor displayed. They were 50 meters from the vents. That would take them back to the surface and fix his waiting snowspeeder. When the watery green lighting flickered and Mud skidded to a halt, ears pricked, Val judged by the animal's reaction, but Sev confirmed his worst fears. Ultrasonic spike, he said. I don't know how, but I think we tripped an alarm. Fix's voice filled their helmets. Drive's running. I'm bringing the snowies as close to the vents as I can. Boss turned to face Val and held his hand out for the bundle. Come on, Sergeant. I can manage. Get going. You first. I said get going, 3-8. No nicknames. That told Boss that Val meant business. Sev and Scorch sprinted down the final stretch to the compartment doors and forced them apart again. The machine voice of rotors and pumps flooded the silent corridor. Everyone stopped dead for a split second. They could hear the clatter of approaching droid and organic guards, the noise magnified by the acoustics of the corridors. Val estimated the minutes and seconds. It wasn't good. Get your sheeps up that vent before I vape the lot of you, Val snapped. Oh, sick. I put them in danger. All for this stupid jaunt, all for lousy credits. Now. He shoved Boss hard in the back, and the three commandos did what they always did when he yelled at them, and used a bit of force. They obeyed. Shift it, Delta. The vent was a steep vertical shaft. The service ladder inside was designed for maintenance droids, with small recessed footholds and a central rail. Boss looked up, assessing it. Let's cheat, he said, and fired his rappel line high into the shaft. The grappling hook clattered against the metal, and he tugged to check the line was secure. Stand by. The shaft could only take one line at a time. Boss shot up the shaft with his hoist, Drive squealing, bouncing the soles of his boots against the wall, and what looked like dramatic leaps until he vanished. The hoist stopped whining. There was a moment of quiet, punctured by the clacking of armor plates. Clear, his voice echoed. Sev shot his line vertically. It made a riffling sound, like an arrow in flight. As it paid out, metal clanged, and the fiber cord went tight. Line secure, Sev. Sev wrenched himself up the shaft with an ungainly skidding technique. Scorch waited for the all clear and then followed him. Val was left standing at the bottom of the shaft with Murd. Facing a long climb, Murd could fly, but not in such a confined space. Val fired his line, waited for one of the commandos to secure it, and then attached the bundle of valuables to it. Then he held out his hands to Murd to take the flamethrower from its mouth. Good, Murd, he whispered. Now, Oya, off you go. Up, Murdica. The Strill could hang on to the line by its jaws, alone if necessary. But Murd just whined in a descent and sat down with all the sulky determination of a human child. Murd, go. Does not Shabir ever listen to me? Go. Murd stayed put. It'll never leave me. Not until the day I die. Val gave up and tugged the line as a signal to the commandos to haul away. He didn't have time to argue with a Strill. If I'm not out of here in 2 minutes, he said, get all this stuff to Captain Odo. Understood. There was a brief silence on Val's helmet comlink. Understood, said Boss. The next few moments felt stretched into forever. The staccato clatter of approaching droid guards grew louder. Mud rumbled ominously and steered towards the doors, poised on his haunches as if to spring at the first droid to appear. It would defend Val to the last. It always had. Eventually, the length of thin fiber cord snaked back down the shaft and slapped against the floor. Boss sounded a little breathless. Up you come, Sergeant. Val reattached the line to his belt and scooped Mud up in both arms, hoping his winch would handle the extra weight as he rose. Kicking away from the shaft wall, the machinery groaned and spat. He could see the cold gray light above him, and a helmet not unlike his own. Mandalorian T-shaped visor peering down at him, picked out in an eerie blue glow. Now he could hear the throb of the snowspeeder's drive. Fixer was right above them, as Val squeezed his shoulders through the top of the vent. Mud leapt clear. Scorch and Sev dropped to the rock-hard snow, with their DC-17s entrained on something Val couldn't yet see. When he hauled himself out, a blaster bolt seared past his head, and he found himself in the middle of a firefight. A ferocious wind roared in his throat. Mike. Val slammed the vent's grill shut and seared it with his custom Merson blaster, welding the metal tight to the coaming. Then he dropped a small portion grenade down the shaft through a gap. The snow shook with the explosion below. Nobody was going to be coming up behind them, but everyone and his pet Ack now knew that Dressian Kirsch Beck had intruders, Republic troops. A distant boom followed by the whomp 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 of artillery, almost drowned out the blaster fire and howling wind. The Galactic Marines were right on time. Okay, Baccarat started, Scorch said. Nice of him to stage a diversion. Magito's relentlessly white landscape gave no clue that it housed cities deep below. Only a few were visible on the surface. The packed snow of eons was pierced by jagged mountains that formed glass canyons like extravagant ice sculptures. A surface patrol, 6 droids on snowshoes like feet, 10 organics who were probably moons under the cold weather gear, had cut them off from the snowspeeder just meters away. Round zapped and steamed off the vessel's fuselage. Fixer kneeling beside it returned a hail of blue D's fire that kept the security patrol pinned down. If that snowy gets damaged, we are never getting off this rock. Val checked his panoramic vision. Mud was close at his side, pressing against him. He could see only the patrol. Nothing else showed up on his sensors. That didn't mean there weren't more closing in on them, though. The big bundle of plunder lay on the snow where Delta had dropped it. Right then, it was simply convenient cover. Val crawled behind the oversized multi-million credit sandbag and took aim. The budup of blasters and ragged breathing filled his helmet. His Delta's. But there was no chatter. Delta Squad exchanged few words during engagements lately. They'd been born together, raised together, and they'd come as close to knowing one another's thoughts as any normal humans could. Now they were lying down, fire exactly as he'd trained them, while Fixer defended their getaway vessel, all without a word. How the Moons would explain away a Mandalorian fighting with Republic forces, Val wasn't sure. But then everyone knew that Mandos would fight for anyone for the right price. Scorch clipped a grenade launcher on his D's. Not good, he said. More droids. Val now saw what Scorch could. His HUD picked up shapes moving in rigid formation, almost invisible to infrared, but definitely showing up in the electromagnetic spectrum. Then he saw them rounding an outcrop of glittering crystal, clanking ludicrous things with long snouts and a platoon of them. Scorch fired the grenade, smashing into the front rank of 4. An eruption of snow and metal fragments fanned into the air and were ripped away by the wind. The rank behind was caught by the shrapnel from their comrades, and 2 toppled over, decapitated by buckled chunks of metal. But the rest kept coming. Val checked the topography on his HUD. They were approaching down an ice wadis almost opposite the first patrol's location, about to cut across the path between Fixer and the rest of them, and that meant the only way to the speeder now was to run the enemy gauntlet. 7 boss began working their way to the snow speeder on their bellies, pausing to fire grenades high over the ice boulders, and then scrambling a few more meters while the droids paused at the Moons, and the Moons took brief cover. Shots hissed around the commandos as blaster bolts shaved paint off their plates and hit the snow, vaporizing it. One round deflected off Val's helmet with an audible sizzle. He felt the impact, like being slapped around the head. All he felt at that moment was foolish, not afraid, not in fear for his life. Just stupid. Stupid for getting it wrong. It was worse than physical terror. He'd overplayed his hand. He'd put Delta in this spot. He had to get them out. You're conspicuous in that black armor, Sarge, Scorch said kindly. It's worse than having Omega alongside. What say you back out of here and leave me to hold them? If anyone was going to do any holding, it was Val. Humor an old man. He fumbled in his belt for an EMP grenade. I stop the droids, you pick off the rats. Rats organics. He was talking like Omega now. Then we all run for it, deal? Scorch twisted the grenade launcher to one side and switched his D's to automatic, forcing the Moon guards to scatter. 2 dropped behind a frozen outcrop. He fired again, shattering the ice, which turned out to be a brittle crystalline rock that sent shards flying like arrows. There was a shriek agony that turned into a panting scream. It echoed off the walls of the canyon. He grunted, apparently satisfied. Sounds like 9 wets left in play. 8 if one's taking care of him, Val said. Moons aren't that nice. Fixer, you okay? Val waited for a reply. The world had suddenly gone silent, except for that screaming moon. The droids seemed to be regrouping behind a 10-meter chunk of dark gray ice. Fixer. Fine, Sarge. Okay, here goes. Val fired this EMP grenade. Had enough explosive power to make a mess of a small room. But its pulse was what really did the damage over a much larger area. It fried droid circuits. The small explosion echoed and scattered chunks of ice. And then there was a long silence punctuated only by the distant pounding of canyon as the galactic marines smashed their way into Jagat. Val focused on the EM image in its HUD. He crawled to the bundle, dragging it into cover and strapping it back on his chest. It was way too much to carry, and he couldn't move properly. He knelt on all fours like a heavily pregnant woman, trying to get up. I don't see movement. It's okay, Sarge. They're zapped. Okay. Just the wets to finish off, then. He switched back to infrared. The moon gods would show up like beacons. I'll warm them up while you make a move. Val pulled out the flamethrower, eased himself into a kneeling position, and opened the valve. Mud cocked its head, eyes fixed on the weapon. Where do you get that, Sarge? Scorch asked. Borrowed it from a flame trooper. Does he know? He won't mind. That thing could melt droids. I was saving the fuel for a tight spot. There was still no movement. Val estimated that the patrol was still in the canyon, maybe looking for a way around behind them. The moon who'd been injured was now silent, unconscious or dead. Like this. I should have a full minute's fuel. So once I start, run. You too, Mud. He gestured Mud towards the snowspeeder and pointed to the flamethrower. Go, Mud. Follow boss. It was just a case of taking a blind run at it. I'm not as fast as I used to be, and I'm carrying too much. But a wall of flame was a blunt and terrifying instrument against almost any life form. Val struggled to his feet and ignited the flame. The roaring jet spat ahead of him as he drew level with the small pass where the moon patrol was holed up. Then the sheet of flame blinded him to what lay beyond it. He only heard the screams and saw the flash on icons across his HUD as Delta Squad sprinted for the idling snowspeeder. Val backed away, counting down the seconds left of his fuel supply, ready to switch to his blaster when it ran out. Nobody was expecting a flamethrower on an ice patrol. Surprise was half the battle. Val turned and ran, gasping for breath. Not a bad turn of speed for his age. Not bad at all on ice, and so heavily laden. And there was Murd ahead of him, having listened for once, and the speeder was coming about, and the ice opened up beneath him. It took him a moment to realize he was falling down a sloping tunnel. and not just sinking into unexpected soft snow. Fixer called out, but even though the sound filled Val's helmet, he didn't catch what was said. The 2 bags of booty took him down. "Get clear," Val yelled, even though he had no need to with a helmet comlink. "That's an order. Sarge, we can't." "Shut up. Go. If you come back for me, if anyone comes back, I'll shoot you on sight." "Sarge, we could. I raised you to survive. Don't humiliate me by going soft." "I can't believe I said that." Delta didn't argue again. Val was in semi-darkness now, his HUD scrolling with the icons of Delta's view of the ice field beneath the speeder as it lifted clear. "Party," said a voice in his helmet, but he lost the rest of the sentence, and the link faded into raw static. "The last thing I'll ever say to them is, 'Shut up. Noble exit, Val.'" Mortal danger was a funny thing. He was sure he was going to die, but he wasn't terrified, and he wasn't worried about more patrols. He was more preoccupied by what he'd fallen into. A vague memory came back to him as he slid down a few more meters, trying to stop his fall with his heels more out of instinct than intent. A detached sense of curiosity prevailed. So this was what dying was actually like. Then he remembered. Magito's ice was honeycombed by tunnels made by giant carnivorous worms. He came to rest with a thud on what felt like a ledge. "Osik," he said. Well, if he wasn't dead, he soon would be. Murd. Where are you, Vertica?" There was no answer, but the crunching and groaning of shifting ice. But he still had the proceeds of the robbery strapped to him. Both his goal and his fate. Val wasn't planning on dying just yet. He was now too rich to let go of life.